Hi guys, I'm back. Well, I haven't been anywhere really. I've just been really busy with stuff. Anyway, this is what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to show you the new Dwarfs, how game testing's going. So I'm going to talk about some of the new rules I talked about in the last video. They have no end soldering checks and counter charges. Some of the new rules that are going to be in V3, and just finish up with other things. Here is the first of the dwarves. Right, these are dwarves of Duluin. They're core warriors. Each house is going to have a different weapon set, and there's going to be 6 different houses, I think. They're going to have 4 different regiments in each one. So you can have the New Bloods, which are like the beginner dwarves. You can have the cores, which are like the backbone of the dwarf army. Then you're going to have the elites, which are the greys. Then you're going to have the whites, and then like the uber hard ones. And now that I've got all these prints done, it's going to take nowhere near as long to do all the rest of the dwarf warriors. Game testing. Game testing is going really well. I'm just going to quickly brush over some pictures of our game tests recently. As you can see, they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. In the game test, we've been looking at the new rules I talked about in the last video, like how units move and now can change shape, and how loose moving units can wrap around into combat to get as many pieces into fight as possible. The battle stress is working really well. So all these new rules I talked about in the last video are all working really well. Now V2 is a really good game system, except it's got 1 or 2 bumps in its gaming flow. One of the bumps was a rule called 2 to 1, and the whole point of 2 to 1 was if you were outnumbered 2 to 1, you would suffer double the amount of battle stress you suffered in that turn. But the problem with that is if we look at this model here, their models are on wafer thin bases, and there's 4 models on one base, so it's difficult to count up the amount of models to work out on the attack. So if we look at this picture here, you see what I mean. So I really racked my brains on this, guys, and eventually I came up with this system where you take the eye line from the back of the unit. Right, so if you can't see your way out of a combat, hence the name, they have no end. You can't see there's no end to the enemy basically, and that's when you start to feel really rattled. And you can play about with this, so you can stick a unit on the end like this, and suddenly they can see their way out of combat, and the unit's not as worried. But if you start closing off all its eye lines, that's when the unit feels really rattled. But the most important thing is about this rule is that you can do this instantly, and that's what makes it really good. So rather than counting up models, so it gets rid of the bump because you can do it instantly, and if you can't, then you can get a 90-degree angle out and sort it out. Right then, that's how I sorted that little problem out. Another little bump in the gaming flow was soldering checks. Now, the problem with soldering checks, if you look here, there's a lot to remember, but I used to have, or in V2, there used to be a value with each one, and that value was just too much for them to remember. They could remember when to take the soldering check, but not the value. So, and I know this because I had the same problem. So if you've got to look in the book to dig through, to look for these values, then that becomes a bump in the game and it's got to go. So my solution was to give the tools to the gamers for them to work this out for themselves, this little value. So I came up with this chart here, and as you look, it's really easy. There is 5 little values for them to remember, and they just add and deduct them onto the soldering check as and when, if they apply, and that was my solution to getting rid of the soldering checks bump in the game. Counter charges. Well, I always wanted counter charges in the game, except for me to add it in, it would have been a bit messy because I would have said, oh well, when you get charged, you take a check. If you pass the check, then you move halfway. Then you'd have to write all the rules out, but it would have been really messy because your opponent would have had an extra move to move the counter charge out of their turn, and that's why I never went for it. So I sort of left it, forgot about it, and I was looking through the rules, and I was working on charges, and I came to the conclusion whilst working on charges that units wouldn't suddenly stop charging after 6 or 8 inches of movement. They're running, they're shouting, they're screaming along, moving as fast as they can. If anything, you're going to have all on stopping this unit from charging. So now you have to take a little check, and there's some new rules, but basically you now have charge moves. So if you declare a target from one end of the board to the other, your unit will just keep charging towards them. Then it occurred to me that what happens if you charge a charging unit? For this is a counter charge, or this is a joint charge between enemies. thought, oh, that's great because now I've got it into the game. So that's another new rule for V3. And it was completely accidental as well. But the great thing about it as well, now that you've got units which are charge moving and charging into each other, is that they can use their charge weapons, so their spears and their lances, against each other. So it throws a whole new dynamic into the game and makes it a little bit more realistic as well. And it just took a paragraph of writing to just basically confirm that this does happen and that you can use your charge weapons against each other. So, it was a really easy rule to apply as well. Right, I've just about finished. I mean, I do have other rules to talk about, but I'm going to save them for my other videos. Just to give you a hint at what I might be talking about in my next video, I'm just thinking or playing around with the concept with casualties and how you take them out of a unit in combat, because traditionally you always take them away from the back, but I was thinking, well, what if you had a unit in the side? Why don't you take the casualty away from the furthest place in the unit from combat and always leave the pieces in combat until last to remove from combat? That way you've always got pieces fighting in and you're not denying any combat to the piece. And I suppose that's what would happen. The pieces would flood over to the side to support that side rather than slowly file down. Anyway guys, it would be really good to get any feedback, not just on this rule, but any of the rules I've discussed, because nothing's set in stone. I'm still very much writing it, and if you've got any feedback, that would be great, because it always helps to focus my ideas. Thanks for watching my video, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, goodbye.